The motorcycle gang genre has been quiet for many, many, many years, but that's all about to change because Jeff Nichols, the director of Mud, Midnight Special, Loving, and Take Shelter, is about to change all that because the Bikeriders packs one hell of a punch, and I'm all about it. You know, one of the things I found interesting about this movie is that Austin Butler is like the leading man of this movie. He's the one that's on, you know, named first on the poster, and then it's like Jodie Comer and Tom Hardy. But after watching this, it's kind of weird because I feel like Austin Butler is like actually the third leading character in this movie. This movie is Jodie Comer and Tom Hardy, and then it should be and Austin Butler on the poster because Jodie Comer and Tom Hardy steal this movie. They steal this movie. And Jodie Comer specifically, she pulls in like an Oscar-winning performance. My God, the moment she starts speaking on screen, you were like smiling, you're laughing, you're invested. She is a revelation in this movie. She is phenomenal, and she's arguably the protagonist of the movie, which I was not expecting at all. And then there's Tom Hardy, man. Tom Hardy, there's just something special about this guy. He's not like a charming actor. He's not like a charismatic actor. This isn't Glenn Powell we're talking about, which, you know, I love Glenn Powell, but Tom Hardy is like this different thing. He actually kind of reminds me of the actors from the old days. People like, you know, Steve McQueen or Marlon Brando or even like Robert De Niro. There's just something, you know, exhilarating about watching him on screen, and he steals every scene that he's in. He is just, as always, Tom Hardy is just a joy to watch. He is aggressive and mysterious, and just he's great. And Austin Butler, I don't know, guys. He was fine, I guess. I don't know. There wasn't anything about his character or his performance that really kind of blew me away. This was just kind of a bummer. You know, after Off the Heels of Doom Part 2, I was expecting something a little more juicier in this movie. But like I said, he's kind of like third tier. Well, his character isn't even the most interesting character of the movie, so that's for starters. But second, it's kind of a quiet role. We don't really know much about him other than he can ride a motorcycle with one hand and he does whatever he wants. But outside of that, he kind of just comes and goes, and which is just like, again, I find that interesting because he's top bill of this movie, and yet he's, you know, barely there compared to Tom Hardy. And well, I would say, you know what? I would say, like, for the first 30 to 40 minutes, Austin Butler is, you know, not the protagonist. I still think Jodie Comer's character, Kathy, is the protagonist of the movie, but Austin Butler does show up more in the first 30 to 40 minutes. But then about the halfway mark, the movie, like, transitions, you know, Austin Butler out a little bit, and then it becomes, you know, Kathy and Johnny's movie, which is, you know, Jodie Comer and Tom Hardy. And something I found surprising, especially coming from Jeff Nichols, is Jeff Nichols does very, you know, I guess slow burn is the best way I can describe it. His movies are all fantastic, but they're very slow in this pacing. They're very character based, and this movie actually felt like it was inspired by like Goodfellas, you know, or Mean Streets or Casino. It's very Martin Scorsese. For instance, like the first 45 minutes to an hour of this movie, it's very fast. There's a voiceover. We're getting montages. There's a never-ending barrage of needle drops. There is an energy to the first like 45 minutes of this movie in the same way that like Goodfellas does or Casino. And I wasn't really expecting that from a Jeff Nichols movie. I was expecting something slower, something it's going to take its time. But no, out the gate, we're getting, you know, again, the Goodfellas effect. We're getting, you know, we're jumping through time, we're getting someone narrating, we're getting music everywhere, we're getting introduced to characters. It was kind of fascinating. This felt like a biker's Goodfellas, you know what I mean? Which isn't a bad thing. And not only in its aesthetic, it's also a rise and fall movie, which is, again, like gangster movies. You start, you know, everyone's happy and there's energy, and then, you know, after the halfway mark of the movie, everything slows down, it gets darker, it gets, you know, more violent, you know, more dramatic. This movie definitely has that structure. But yeah, even though the structure of this movie is familiar, I found the story to be pretty captivating, if I'm being honest. Like, getting to hang out with a group of bikers and to see how they, how they bike, I guess, or how their gang operates, it was really fascinating. And I think Johnny was also an interesting character because he's the soft-spoken guy, he's a father, he's a husband, and just seeing his journey of like starting this gang and getting all his friends together and just driving around. And also, I like that, I think that the public's, I'm going to guess, but the public's perspective of like a biker gang is just like violence and motorcycles and drugs and so on and so forth. And this movie, at least for the first 45 minutes, it's like, oh, these guys are actually kind of cool. They're very protective of one another. They got a code. A lot of them are nice. That kind of changes in the last 45 minutes of the movie. But yeah, it was just a fun ride to hang out with these guys. And, there's some awesome side characters. Norman Reedus shows up. Michael Shannon's great as always, which I think this is their 4th or 5th movie together, him and Jeff Nichols. But yeah, if I'm being honest, I am a sucker for rise and fall movies. I find them to be very interesting, especially how they're structured with a lot of energy and excitement in the first hour, and then the second hour, the back half of the rise and fall is like super depressing and dark and very dramatic. I like that kind of stuff, and this movie has all that, and it nails it. It really does. By the time the movie was over, I was like, well done. Well done, Jeff Nichols. Motorcycle people are back. Sons of Anarchy, Part 2. I'm trying to think what else. It actually kind of surprised me how not violent this movie is. I mean, there is violence in the movie, but it's not like over the top like Scorsese would do. Like Scorsese kind of like revels in the violence a little bit, and this one doesn't. Like when violence happens, it either cuts away really quickly or we just, move on to a different scene. And I find that to be very interesting. I was like, oh man, like every time there's a build up to a violent scene, it's like you're kind of getting ready for it. You're like, oh my gosh, and then it happens, but then we're quickly, whisked away to a different scene or, smash cut to something else. And I don't know, I found that to be very interesting. There is one bit that was fantastic, which is that Tom Hardy's gang, was it the Vandals? I think it's the Vandals. The Vandals are at this park and they're having a picnic, and they're starting to, and this other gang kind of walks in and accuses one of the Vandals members of scratching their bike, if I remember right. Tom Hardy gets in, and they're all like, the two gangs are facing each other, and Tom Hardy's, I think, trying to talk through the situation, right? And Austin Butler, who was out taking a piss, who's missing all of this, he kind of comes into the situation from afar, and he sees the two gangs staring at each other, and he's like, oh, hell no. And he like bolts over there and immediately punches the other guy, and then a fight breaks out. I don't know. This movie is actually surprisingly pretty funny, especially Jodie Comer's character. A lot of stuff that comes out of her mouth is pretty hilarious. But that scene in particular was like, all right, that was fun. That was a fun scene. But yeah, the performances were incredible. Like I said, Jodie Comer and Tom Hardy steal this movie. Austin Butler kind of just comes and goes. I wasn't that thrilled about Austin Butler, unfortunately, but man, Tom Hardy and Jodie Comer, they are worth seeing this movie alone, like straight up. They are worth seeing this movie alone. Their performances are incredible. And like, yeah, again, the fact that this felt like a Goodfellas, Scorsese gangster movie was also very thrilling. The movie's funny. It's got some good action. It's got a really good story. It really sucks you in. Yeah, this is one of the best movies I've seen this summer and one of the best movies of the year. It is phenomenal. Please go check this one out. Please support it. It's fantastic, especially if you're a Jeff Nichols fan. If you're a Jeff Nichols fan, if you liked any of the movies I listed earlier, please go check this one out. It's great. So yeah, did you guys see the Bikeriders? Did you like it? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you on the next one.